As you know, the theme for LEAD is responsible growth, and this next segment will be exploring a greener growth and advertising's role in shaping the future of the economy. I will shortly be inviting up Kate Waters to introduce this session, but first we have a short film for you.
Let me tell you. Girl, you my little boo thing.
Why go green, one might ask. What is green, one might also ask.
Tonight, homes in East London have been evacuated after a major wildfire.
This is the point to act.
We all have a part to play.
You my little boo thing. So I don't give a hoot what you do, say, girl, I know you little.
We had Birdside Green Cuisine dippers for lunch. They're made from plants, not chickens.
And we're going plant-based, aren't we, darling, today?
Tell 'em I'm next. Tell 'em you follow.
Trees and plants are the lungs of our planet. I firmly believe that we need to be greening up.
I love that this year has a sustainable theme.
This is actually a green carpet. It's made of grass.
Hey, we're farming over here.
We've got wind turbines on site, we've got solar panels.
That's huge.
Renting clothes. This is the way forward.
So this is better for the planet and it's better for your purse.
Oh, bro, our clothes are here.
Tell 'em I'm next. Tell 'em you follow something fresh, I know.
It is our choice. There is no question that we can do it.
It's working out the first steps and incentivising people to take them.
It makes everything worthwhile.
Great change is on the way.
Tell 'em you follow something fresh, I know.
Please welcome Kate Waters, Director of Client Strategy and Planning at ITV.
I'm here to talk about advertising's response to the climate crisis. So why am I starting with a picture of Mr. Bates versus the Post Office? Well, as you can imagine, everyone at ITV is immensely proud of the impact that this drama has had. It's reached over 17 million people, it's generated about 1.5 billion social impressions, and most importantly, it galvanised the government into making extraordinary change. And that change came about because so many people signed petitions, got angry, and it led to this extraordinary change that we now see. But it is, of course, therefore a fantastic reminder of the power of creative content to drive behaviour change. And that is exactly what we need if we're going to step up to the climate crisis. But solving the climate crisis for advertising is about much more than behaviour change, which is why I want to start with a reminder of the 5 pillars of Ad Net Zero. We at ITV, like many other people in the industry, are organising our advertising response around these 5 pillars. So yes, we are investing in Ad Green to make sure that we lower the emissions attached to ad production. We're building models to make sure that we understand the emissions attached to advertising, so we can very much feed into all the carbon calculators that the industry is building. But of course, the foundation for everything that we do comes from our science-based targets. So we've committed to being net zero by 2035. And because we're a PLC, we don't just have to set our targets, we also need to report our targets and the progress that we are making towards them. So we report through CDP, that's the Carbon Disclosure Project, and we also report through an organisation called the TCFD. This is a world that is absolutely full of acronyms, and that is, if I remember, the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. Now, why do I make such a big deal about reporting? The reason being because if we are going to understand the way in which we are going to hit our targets, we also have to understand the risk that is attached to the revenues that come into the business. So yes, that is the risk attached to the advertising revenues that we take in ITV, which is why last year, for the first time, what we did was look at to what extent are our ad revenues aligned to our net zero targets. So this pie chart, I think I'm going to be the only person today possibly with a graph, this pie chart shows you the proportion of our ad revenues that are also aligned to net zero. So you can see that around 86% of all of our top 100 advertisers, they have well-disclosed, well-embedded science-based targets, and they are very much on the same course that we are. So I think this is fantastically good news for the industry, because it means that we have all set the targets that we need. But of course, there is a huge difference between setting a target and actually meeting it. So if these advertisers, and I should also say that actually 100% of all of the media agencies have also committed to science-based targets and are well on their way to reaching them as well. If they're going to hit these targets, it means that at least some of them are going to be advertising lower carbon emission products and services. And that is going to require them to persuade their customers, persuade us as consumers, to make the kind of behaviour change that is needed to adopt those new products and services. And just to, I guess, underline the scale of the behaviour change that is needed. This is a chart from a publication that came out a couple of years ago from the Institute for Change, the Tony Blair Institute for Change. It's called Planes, Homes and Automobiles, and it looks at the role of behaviour change in helping us as a nation hit our targets. The blue box is essentially the proportion of the emissions reduction that can be made without consumer behaviour change. The green boxes are the ones that require consumer behaviour change. And as you can see over this chart on the right, from 2020 to 2035, the proportion of change that is required is about 60% from consumer behaviour change. So it's a not insignificant amount of change that we have to drive if we are going to stay on that path to net zero. And of course, this is what we as an advertising industry are fantastically good at. I think it is an immense privilege to work in an industry where we have the creativity, we have the reach, and we have the influence to drive that kind of mass change. And it's why at ITV we are immensely proud that we won the Ad Net Zero Award, the Grand Prix last year for our partnership with eBay and Love Island. It was an extraordinary partnership and one that drove not just I think, immense fame for the kind of both brands, but it also led to some real measurable impact. And so I'm delighted to welcome Eve Williams, who is the General Manager and VP of eBay UK, and also Chiara Manco, who is from System1 and with whom we've collaborated on a lot of other work in this area. And we're going to have a chat about that. Please come. Eve, I thought since we've got this lovely picture behind us that we should start with perhaps talking about the partnership. So I think this is one of those that when you look at it in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. But actually, it was something that I think, took a bit of chat, didn't it, to get to? We had to work on it quite hard. Perhaps you can talk to us a little bit about how we got there.
Yeah, so eBay, as hopefully a lot of people in the room know, is the kind of original marketplace for pre-loved of so many different categories and in so many different conditions. But it can be difficult to drive the kind of change and to drive the kind of conversation around that and kind of normalizing it. And we, in the way that we've talked about a lot through today, take it very seriously, the responsibility that we have to think about how we change behavior and kind of nudge people's behavior to think about things differently. And so we were looking for the kind of media properties or the ways that we could genuinely reach an audience where we thought we needed to change, where we had an opportunity to change behavior, but do it in a way that would surprise people and would disrupt things. And so when this opportunity came up, the thing I think that was most exciting about it was the fact that people were so unsure of it. And people were so concerned, well, how is it going to work and how are the audience going to respond to it? And I think that's what was exciting about it, that it presented as an opportunity to create a conversation and create a discussion around something that was so unexpected, because what had the convention and the norm had been fast fashion and Love Island and reality shows. And actually what we wanted to try and do was reformulate the conversation to be more focused on the fact that you can rethink this and you can rethink how you can kind of incorporate pre-loved and then kind of take a more responsible approach as well.
And can you talk to us a little bit about perhaps how you saw that play out with your customers, the kind of response, I guess, to the partnership?
Yes. So I think we were surprised to some extent by the extent of the reaction we got to it, and we put an enormous amount of effort into making sure that every single step of it we did in a very authentic way that spoke to the audience and spoke to the viewers and also engaged with the cast and with ITV in a way that was really relatable. And as you talked about a second ago with the incredible success of Mr. Bates, this is driving a very different type of change, and it's incredibly commendable what's happened there. But what was important to us was that we needed to show up in a way that was really genuine and authentic to the audience. And so we focused a lot on making sure that every single element of the detail was as it needed to, was going to create the biggest impact. And we saw some great results from it, not only in kind of amount of listings we got in pre-loved fashion, but also in perceptions of people rethinking and considering adding pre-loved fashion to their wardrobe, which was the ultimate goal.
And I think one of the very interesting things was almost the role that the islanders played as, if you like, as kind of messengers, and it's something that we can come on and chat a bit more about from the green print. But I know that there were various kind of, I guess, little touches that for me really brought that kind of partnership home. So the fact that each of the islanders could choose their own wardrobe, they could reflect their personal style. We had a stylist on set. And I think also they had a kind of shared wardrobe, which almost kind of brought to life this kind of sense of cyclical fashion and the idea of sort of sharing, which was kind of so very powerful.
Yeah.
But what, I don't know if you picked up on any of the sort of feedback you got from customers. What was the kind of impact, I guess, of having the islanders as those kind of relatable messengers, if you like?
Yeah, so I think the messengers were absolutely key to it, because it comes back to why you decide to invest in a partnership like this to create content rather than just to pay for media around the proposition, because we were very conscious that trying to tell a story like this, you couldn't just do through like 30-second slots or through a small piece of digital content. But what we were able to do through working more closely with Love Island is that it is a show that is synonymous with style, whether you like that style or not. But you've got all these different people with all this different incredible style, and they gave us the opportunity to be able to demonstrate that pre-loved fashion had this incredible role, that it could play in different people's style and you could mix it up. And actually, we were then able to continue that conversation with those islanders as they came out of the villa as well. You can tell that I'm a fan because I talk about them as other islanders. So we took on people like Tasha, who is one of our eBay style ambassador now. So she's part of the kind of eBay family. She has continued to work with us for the past couple of years since she was on the show. And her she's kind of famous for her style, and it was absolutely essential to us that we were looking for individuals who could really demonstrate the power of that. We've seen, when we look at the actual impact, we've seen about a 30% increase in numbers of listings of pre-loved items. We sell now about 5 pre-loved dresses, 2 pairs of pre-loved jeans, 7 pre-loved tops every minute. We have seen a 300% increase in searches for pre-loved fashion on site. And this is all for us part of a wider narrative of how do you completely redefine the industry and the way that we think about kind of shocking at unconventional times. So at Black Friday, we only promote things that are pre-loved. So we talk about certified refurb, we talk about in technology, we talk about authenticity guarantee for things like sneakers. So it's all about how do you surprise people at times when they're heavily linked to consumerism. And I hope that we can continue to find partnerships with the likes of Love Island. We're in the 4th series now. We've continued to think about what's the new way we talk about it. This series has been all about eradicating people thinking on kind of single-use fashion. 80% of 15 to 34s wear an item once and throw it away or pass it, or hopefully now we'll start to pass it on. So the messengers have played a massively important role, but they've kind of continued to do that and help us tell this story. And Love Island as a partnership has allowed us to kind of continue and build on that narrative as well.
And talk to us a little bit about, I guess, the kind of balance of messaging in this, because I think one of the things that's so interesting about the partnership is actually it doesn't really shout sustainability. It is a case of sort of show it rather than say it in many respects. That must have been something you thought quite hard about.
Absolutely, because nobody wants to turn up and look at eBay's come to the party and wasn't invited. And so it was really important to us that we did show up in a way that surprised people, but that the coverage came from press or the coverage came from social feeds where people would comment on where the outfits had come from. And so the amount of kind of presence we have and the way that we talk about it has definitely evolved over those 4 series, but it definitely started at a kind of a smaller way to kind of step into it to see what reactions were like. And as we said, kind of the show and don't tell, the kind of nudge and don't judge, like any way that you want to articulate it, it was essential that we found the ways to make it just feel completely natural. And also we knew that the Love Islanders would not be interested and would not kind of participate if they didn't also have a chance to do it in their own way.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Chiara, perhaps we should turn now to the green print.
Yes.
So this was obviously a study that we worked very closely on. Also, I should say with Richard Shotton, who I'm sure will be known to many people in the audience. He's a behavioural scientist. But maybe talk to us a little bit about, I guess, the kind of the partnership we've got, the rationale, and why we went about doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
The starting point really is the partnership that System1 and ITV have had for the past 3 years. So as part of this great partnership, we work on research together on topics that are very close to the industry's heart. So a couple of years ago, we started with Feeling Seen, which was all about inclusion, representation, diversity in advertising. Then we zeroed in specifically on the older audience, so fairly representing and also engaging older audiences in advertising. That was Wise Up. And then last year came the green print. So it was very much one of the belief that we both shared, as to Kate's previous point, that advertising can really have, this role in changing behaviour and driving positive behaviour. And we wanted to create a guide that would make it, would give actionable points to brands and agencies on how they could create ads that would both grow their brands and also provoke that positive behaviour that's going to be good for the planet. And so for the how to grow brands part of things, obviously at System1 we're a creative effectiveness agency, so we have a wealth of knowledge around that. But then for the how to drive behaviour change, that's when we turned to Richard and we got all of his lovely insight. And so really, this is how it came about. And we worked together at looking at best-in-class case studies, brands that are already doing this amazingly, obviously eBay being one of them, and also drawing out some themes with those actionable tips on how you can do it right.
So I think one of the things we did before we kind of almost got into the sort of themes was just look at the number of ads that feature some kind of sustainable sort of message.
Yes.
And I think we've got it up here. So we looked at 1,000 ads, I think, from the past 3 years. And I think we were both quite surprised to discover the percentage of those that featured some kind of sustainable message, which, if we reveal now, was
only 8%.
Only 8%, which I think we thought, given the amount of sort of discussion in the industry, was going to be sort of somewhat higher than that. And I think it speaks to, I guess, the enormous opportunity, perhaps, for advertising to sort of do more in this space. But perhaps you can talk also about the kind of shocking finding we found about what those messages actually are.
Exactly. So we thought this was the big shock, but then another one came straight after. Essentially, we looked at that percentage, that 8% that did contain an environmental message, and we broke down the environmental messages by theme, area of behavior that we're trying to drive. And we saw that vast majority talked about recycling, for example, 22% of ads did. Very few actually talked about circular fashion, very few talked about energy. And then, though, we cross-referenced this data with scientific research by this publication called Environmental Research Letters, which actually ranked environmental actions for their impact on the planet, and turns out that recycling is only 60th. So, and those actions that were featured way less, such as, for example, switching to green energy or, alternative to transport, actually rank much higher in terms of their impact. Circular fashion, only 2% of ads that we looked at from that sample of 1,000 featured it, and yet it's 40th on the list. It's much higher up than recycling is, and yet recycling is up there. And also there's an Ipsos research that told us that in British consumers' minds as well, recycling is among the top ones, right? And we can understand why, right? It's like a very tangible action. We know, again, from behavioral science that when we can see something, we can see the impact of something, we perceive it as more impactful per se, compared to things that have more of a reward in the long term in the future. But in essence, a lot of advertising is focusing on the wrong areas, or like the ones with least impact. So it's not just about trying to have more of those environmental messages, it's also about making sure that they focus on the most important areas.
And I think there's a little bit of perhaps of chicken and egg going on here as well, isn't there? Which is, you could argue that if people think that recycling is the kind of most important, it's the easiest and best understood, that's the one that advertisers will focus on. And then also it might be that actually, because we focus on that, that's what reinforces that kind of belief. So again, it feels like there's a huge opportunity here for advertising to perhaps focus on the behaviours that are likely to make the kind of biggest difference. And as we alluded to earlier, I think behaviour change is going to be an enormous part of what we have to do to kind of hit this target.
I think, though, one thing we've got to bear in mind, though, is that people don't buy pre-loved fashion, like as an example of it, first and foremost because they want to reduce waste. Like their biggest motivation when you speak to them is style, like individual style and expression, saving money and being able to get brands they wouldn't have been able to get before. And there is a benefit and they feel good about the fact that they've also reduced waste. And so I think we have to think about it very carefully, that there has also never been a time in this generation that is more relevant for sustainable, like for sustainability, for saving energy, for buying secondhand, because actually it is also the most economical and it is the thing that saves you the most money, and that is the thing that, I mean, we heard in the last session that people care about the most right now. And so I think it's important for us as brands to also think about the way that we can drive a behaviour without necessarily having to talk about that specific message, because while we might feel good about the fact that we've done a campaign that talks about being green, if that's not the thing that's actually going to drive the significance of change, then why do it?
And that is the most perfect segue into, I think, one of the kind of most interesting findings from the Green Print. So I think just because it's kind of a useful thing to see actually how the System1 methodology works, what we've got is a video.
Go on a great Western adventure.
Cheerio, children! See you at the beach!
Last one there's a rotten egg.
Thank you. Look, the sea! I can't see!
That's not good.
What time do you call this? I think it's time we thought about taking the train.
Tell us again about the chicken?
Great Western Railway. Adventures start here.
So Chiara, maybe just talk us through what we can see here. And then
Yeah,
we'll talk about
absolutely. So yeah, this is a snippet of the System1 methodology in action. What you can see is what we call face trace at the top right. So essentially that is the emotional journey that people experience when watching the ad. So at the bottom you can see the positive emotion, which is dark green, surprise, light green, happiness. And you see there's a lot of peaks, like ups and downs, so you can really pinpoint the scenes that are driving the emotion. So a lot of the twists and turns and humorous scenes are what would be driving those moments of happiness. At the top, the darker colors are like the negative emotion elicited by the ad. So this ad scored really well across our metrics. I'm not going to go too much in detail on that, but essentially we measure both the long-term and the short-term potential of an ad, all based on the emotions that it elicits. And there's a number of reasons why. So it touches on a lot of the themes that we found in the Green Print, actually, and some of the ones that eBay partnership also featured. And I would say, to your point, Eve, what you were saying is absolutely right. We had a whole theme called Suggest It, Don't Shout It, which is about you don't have to talk about the environment to drive change, drive behavior change in this area. Actually, sometimes it may be more beneficial not to do it, and just align the behavior that you're trying to drive with something that the audience naturally cares about. So it can be, you know, cool fashion or wearing your islanders, your favorite islanders clothes. In this case, it can be just, you know, positioning rail travel as the most convenient way to travel without saying, oh, and we're reducing, you know, it's fewer emissions and this is good for the planet, etc. It's just giving an immediate reward to people rather than talking about the greater cause of the environment, which sometimes can feel more abstract and more detached from us because the reward is not immediate. So this ad is definitely doing a great job of that. And it's also doing a great job at storytelling. So, you know, rather than, again, focusing on stats or abstractions, really engaging us through storytelling, through entertaining, which was a point that was made earlier as well, right? So about how you also drive trust in advertising by entertaining people. One of our mottos at System1, at least it has been for a while, by courtesy of our Orlando Wood, was entertain for commercial gain. So there's only value in entertaining, right? It's about building that emotional engagement. It's about building trust.
And I think that's something that people quite often forget when they step into this space. So I think there's a sense that almost if you have a brand or a product which is doing good, that actually you need to shout about why it's doing good and how it's doing good. And so suddenly we forget that actually the most trusted advertising is the advertising that entertains, and actually according to your data, often the most effective advertising is advertising that kind of also entertains. And I think that for me is one of the kind of biggest learnings from this whole study, which is actually at our peril do we forget the kind of single biggest drivers of creative effectiveness and suddenly sort of forget all of that because we think we're doing something else. Actually, it's one and the same, isn't it? If we want to drive some of this behaviour change, yes, we can talk about the environment as and when it's relevant, but that doesn't actually necessarily equate to the most kind of effective way to do it. So I think it's a really interesting ad because I think it pulls out, as you say, so many of those kind of themes. Which is great. I guess I can see that we're running short of time, so I think maybe we should finish just with kind of like maybe if there's like one bit of advice from each of you, given your different perspectives on this, that you would give to the audience. And if they have brands or services that can operate really and need to thrive in a kind of lower carbon economy, what would your advice be to them in the context of advertising and the role that it can play?
I would always go back to the point about how are you going to approach something in the most disruptive way that could potentially then be amplified elsewhere. So we talked about the role of messengers, the islanders talking about things style after the show, but actually it was also the press and the media that I think was one of the things that drove the greatest coverage and trust, and therefore it wasn't eBay preaching and talking about it, it was media commentators and stylists and fashion journalists who were talking about it too. And so there's kind of two approaches to it. I know I said a second ago, you don't have to just be talking about the, do the specific thing, like buy something pre-loved or in the circular economy. People will do that for you if you position it in the right way. And so insert yourself in culture in a way that's going to be disruptive, that then gets you the media coverage, which then builds the trust through the messages in the media, plus through the commentators that then kind of help you to tell that story as well, and take some risks while you do it.
That's great. Chiara, perhaps as a little reminder, here are all of the kind of green hints that we identified in the green print.
Yeah, so obviously all of that. But if I was to say something overarching, I think a really important thing and a trap that perhaps a lot of brands and agencies fall in when talking about the environment is focusing on the severity of the crisis, right? And as much as obviously it is serious and we're not trying to say you should be lighthearted about it, if you can deliver a serious message in more of a lighthearted way, in a hopeful way, rather than one that makes people worried or concerned or afraid, then it's going to be much more effective. There's something called the ostrich effect, where we essentially bury our head in the sand when something makes us feel scared or worried or threatened. And so really, to try and avoid triggering that, it's really important to leave with people with a hopeful message. And there's plenty of, the case studies that we looked at in the green print really show that, and the power of that, of using humor, of using hope. And then the final point would be really remembering that the rules to create a great environmental ad are the same as any other great ad you want to create. So first of all, you have to entertain, like we were saying, and then weave the environmental message in it as subtly as you want to. But really at the core, it should very much be something that is able to emotionally engage people through, different messages, through culture, and so on.
That's great. Thank you so much to both of you. I hope you've all enjoyed the discussion, and I think it's pretty much nearly time for lunch, isn't it? But thank you very much.